Why does your heart race and your fist clench during a simple conversation with a neighbor or a coworker? You are living in the shadows of old survival instincts that turn everyday interactions into perceived threats. It's time to interrogate those forged pathways and use cognitive reframing to stop responding like you're still behind bars. Welcome back to the Conviction Fiction Podcast. My name is Antoine Rivers, and I'm your host. And today we're going to challenge the stories we've been told about incarceration, redemption, and what it truly means to become free. Because here's a truth that many people outside of prison walls will never understand. A prison sentence does not end the day the gates open. The Department of Corrections or the Federal Bureau of Prisons can release your body. The judge can say your debt is paid. The paperwork can actually say you are a free citizen. But there's another prison that nobody talks about. The prison of conditioned thinking, the prison of learned aggression, the prison of survival instincts that kept you alive in one environment, but can destroy you in another. And before we go any further, I need to make something very clear. Do not hate the person you were. That man or woman who learned to scan every room, who never sat with their back to the door, who questioned everyone's motive and responded to disrespect before it had the chance to grow, that person kept you breathing. When I spent years behind the walls, there were lessons I had to learn to survive. You understood quickly that weakness could be exploited. You learned that your reputation could be your protection. And you also learned that hesitation could be dangerous. Your nervous system adapted because it had to. Your mind created a software program designed specifically for this hostile environment. The problem is that that software does not automatically update the day you walk out. Many women and men come home physically free, but emotionally incarcerated. They bring the yard to every grocery store. They bring the cell block to family dinners. They bring prison politics into their marriages, workplaces, and neighborhoods. A coworker challenges an idea in a meeting, and suddenly your fist tightens and you're ready to squabble up. A stranger could actually bump into you, and your mind immediately begins calculating whether you're being tested or if you need to put up fists. A partner may ask a difficult question, and instead of hearing concern, you hear accusation. You're no longer responding to what is happening in front of you. You're basically responding to memories of what happened behind you. So today we're going to confront that invisible prison. We're going to examine the survival mechanisms that once protected us, question whether they are still serving us, and develop the cognitive tools necessary to stop fighting battles that no longer exist. Because the greatest proof that you are free is not that you can walk away from prison. The greatest proof is that prison no longer controls how you react. This is the Conviction Fiction. Welcome, Conviction Collective. There's a ghost that follows many men and women long after they leave prison. It's not a person, it's not a memory, it's a way of thinking. It is the ghost of the yard. Now, the yard was a place where respect was currency, vulnerability was dangerous, and every interaction had the potential to become a confrontation. You learn to read faces, you learn to analyze body language, you learn to recognize changes in tone. You learn to identify threats before they even arrive. And that was not paranoia. That was intelligence. That was adaptation. The human brain is an incredible survival machine. It constantly asks one question: what do I need to do to make sure I see tomorrow? When you spend years in an environment where your safety depends on being alert, your brain strengthens those pathways. It becomes efficient at detecting danger because danger was often real. The problem is that the brain does not always distinguish between the environments where those instincts were built and the environments where you now live. The same system that protected you from violence on the yard can interpret a disagreement at work as a challenge to your identity. Your body does not wait for logic. It basically reacts. Your heartbeat increases, your muscles tighten, your breathing changes, your voice becomes louder. Your mind starts preparing a defense before the other person has even finished speaking. That reaction is your old survival programming activating. And this is where grace becomes necessary. You have to thank the old version of yourself. Thank them for being alive. Thank him or her for making it through nights when fear was your roommate. Thank them for protecting you when nobody else could. But then you have to tell them, I appreciate your service, but I no longer need you driving this vehicle. Because the same skills that kept you alive in prison can cost you everything in freedom. They can cost you relationships, they can cost jobs, they can cost you opportunities. And in the worst cases, they can cost you your freedom all over again. So, one of the most dangerous moments in a person's life happens in a fraction of a second. It is the gap between what happens to you and how you choose to respond. That's the gap between what happens to you and how you choose to respond. That gap is where your future lives. Behind bars, that gap had to be very small. Too much hesitation could be interpreted as weakness. Too much patience could invite problems. You develop defense mechanisms because the environment demanded them. The stare down, the hard tone, the immediate challenge, the refusal to apologize, the inability to admit fear, the need to win every verbal battle. Those were not character flaws, guys. Those were prison tools. The issue is that a man or woman who brings prison tools into civilian life is like a mechanic trying to fix a computer with a hammer. The tool might be powerful, but it is wrong for the problem at hand. Your neighbor asking you to move your car is not challenging your manhood or your womanhood. Your boss giving you constructive criticism is not trying to embarrass you. Your spouse expressing frustration is not declaring all out war. But hypervigilance changes the story. It whispers, hey man, they disrespecting you. They think you're weak. You better handle this right now. And before you know it, you are defending yourself against an enemy that never existed. This is why emotional intelligence is not weakness. It is advanced survival. It is the ability to separate what is happening from what your trauma is telling you is happening. And that distinction can save your future. Now, here's where the real work begins, because growth does not happen when you eliminate your emotions. Growth happens when you stop allowing your emotions to become your commander. The next time your chest tightens and your fists start clenching and your old programming starts screaming for control, I want you to do something that feels kind of unnatural. I want you to pause just a few seconds, take a breath, and ask yourself a simple question. Does this situation require a warrior or does it require a neighbor? That single question can interrupt years of conditioning. Then conduct a mental audit. If I respond the way I would have responded 10 years ago, what could happen? Do I lose my job? Do I damage my marriage? Do I scare my children? Or do I create a situation where the police become involved? Do I sacrifice 20 years of progress for 20 seconds of pride? Because the truth is painful. Many people did not return to prison because they committed a calculated crime. They returned because they had an emotional moment, a moment where old programming took over, a moment where they responded to a civilian problem with a prison solution. Cognitive reframing requires you to rename the situation. So instead of saying he disrespected me, you might want to try, maybe he communicated poorly. Or instead of she's attacking me, maybe she's just expressing frustration. Instead of I have to prove something, how about thinking I have nothing to prove? That is not surrender. That is control. Now, many of us understand the importance of updating our phones, right? We update our computers. If it's a little software update, we might even schedule it for later on. We installed a new software because old systems eventually become incompatible with new environments. So why do we refuse to update our minds? Why do we refuse to update those systems? You cannot operate a life of freedom using a survival system designed for confinement. The language you use matters. You got to stop saying, I can't let nobody play with me, but start saying, I can set healthy boundaries without destroying relationships. It's all in the language. You can stop believing that or saying to yourself, well, I don't trust nobody, right? Instead, why not ask ourselves the questions or start saying to ourselves, I take my time determining who deserves my trust, right? I don't always have to be ready. I have the ability to respond wisely if something happens. That simple mind shift is everything. Power is not measured by how loud you can become. Power is measured by how much control you can maintain when everyone around you loses theirs. The strongest person in the room is often the person who could escalate the situation, but chooses not to escalate the situation. That's not fear. That's not discipline. That's discipline. For years, prison taught us a mindset of scarcity. There's limited respect. There's limited safety, limited resources. Everyone was competing for a small piece of control. Freedom requires abundance. There are opportunities, there are relationships, there are careers, there are businesses to build, there are children waiting to see what a healed parent looks like. You're no longer fighting to survive. You're learning how to live. Now, the greatest challenge after incarceration is not staying out of prison. Let's just get that myth out of the way because we're changing the narrative. We have to change the narrative, right? The greatest challenge is not getting out of prison or staying out of prison. The greatest challenge is becoming the person who no longer belongs in prison. That means your identity must change. You are not a resident. You are not an inmate number. You are not the person that was convicted anymore. You're a father, a husband, a wife, a mother, a business owner, an employee, a mentor, a leader, a neighbor. Every day you have a choice. You can react from the person who was trapped in a cage, or you can respond as the person who walked out of a cage. There's tremendous, overwhelming strength in walking away from a confrontation. Some people will call that weakness. Let them call it weakness, because the same people who glorify losing control will not be there when you lose your job, your family, or your freedom. Real power is saying that I had the ability to destroy this moment and I chose to preserve my future. That is what emotional mastery looks like. That's what rehabilitation actually means. Not just changing where your body sleeps, but changing how your mind interprets the world. Now, there's a phrase many of us have heard before: stay out. Everybody say it. All the podcasts around reentry, all the prison rehab centers, they always say stay out. But staying out is more than avoiding handcuffs. It means refusing to allow old pain to dictate new decisions. It means recognizing the survival skills that saved your life, honoring them, and then having the courage to evolve beyond them. The yard taught you how to survive. Now, freedom must teach you how to live. Here at the Conviction Fiction Podcast, that is our mission: to expose the lies that keep people mentally incarcerated and tell the truth about transformation. If this message speaks to you, share it with someone who's struggling to adjust after incarceration. Go ahead and pick up a copy of my books. You got the Conviction Fiction, got No Turning Back, Turning Forward, and the newest one, No Going Back, which is actually a 365 day manual that is built from real experience, real pain, and the belief that your past can be a lesson rather than a life sentence. Because the ultimate flex is not proving that you are dangerous. The ultimate flex is proving that you are healed. Until the next time, keep turning your conviction into your calling. See you next week.